right, folks. Welcome once again, everybody, to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. I'm your host, Mike Frank, here with Jamie Uyeyama, and we're going to talk some Irish football. We also have Greg Flamong, who will come on and talk a little bit. He's producing the show, and we got lots to talk about. We're going to talk some spring football. We'll answer your questions as well. Before we get going, I wanted to mention it's a great time to sign up for Irish Sports Daily. We've got spring football is going to be heating up. I think we're thinking about like March 18th is kind of the date we've heard. You know, we don't have any of the actual details yet, but things are going to be heating up with that. There's lots of visits from recruits that's being scheduled right now. Guys will be on campus, and recruiting is going to start heating up as well. So great time to sign up. Go to the front page of Irish Sports Daily. Click on the premium section. You can sign up for a subscription today. Also wanted to mention our sponsor, which is ESQ Clothing. ESQ has been making the best handmade custom suits, sport coats, tuxedos, and shirts for the last decade. Has been featured on GQ, ESPN, USA Today, and you've seen them dressing your favorite players and coaches. ESQ only gets the best fabric from Italy and England's top mills. With over 40,000 fabrics to choose from, you're guaranteed to look your best. Go visit esqclothing.com and book your appointment. Mention ISD, get 10% off your entire purchase. Once again, that's esqclothing.com. Also wanted to mention, we do have the podcast that some of you listen. If you want to check us out on YouTube, it's also uploaded where you can watch the actual video and participate in the chat. You can search for us at Irish Sports Daily or Irish Sports Daily on YouTube, and then make sure you subscribe and like the channel. That would greatly help us. And then if you do like what you see there, we'd love it if you would share the video out there. Share it with your friends, your Notre Dame friends and family, and it definitely helps us grow the channel. So we'd greatly appreciate that. All right. Yama, last week we talked quarterback, running back. This week we're going to get into the wide receiver position, and I think this is the one position that I think a lot of people are excited about, but also we don't know a whole lot about at this point. We know the players that will be involved, but there's just not a lot of, I guess, I don't want to say returning success because, Jaden Greathouse has had certainly a lot of playing time and had done a lot of good things for Notre Dame. Jordan Faison's done a lot of good things, but we got guys like KK Smith, Micah Gilbert, Cam Williams, Logan Saldate. We have a couple freshmen and Jerome Bettis Jr. going to be joining the mix here, as well as Elijah Barres. Will Pauling will also be in the mix, but I'm not sure how much Will Pauling will participate. Hopefully more than I think as far as spring goes, but I've heard he may have like a little lingering injury too that he may have to overcome. I hope I'm wrong on that and I have some bad information, but I've heard that that may be the case, and that would kind of suck because, we'd like to see him develop and get some time. Malachi Fields will be there in the summer. Won't be there for spring ball. We knew that going in. Yama, I mean, I look at this here, and it's an interesting group. What I see here, you look at Greathouse, and obviously a guy who could play some slot, and I think you and I agree that that's probably one of his best options, and he can be very effective in that situation. Jordan Faison, could play some field, could also play some slot. KK Smith could play some field, some slot. And Micah Gilbert, a lot of people think is more of a boundary. Cam, more of a field receiver. Logan Saldate, obviously, probably more of a slot receiver. And then, Jerome Bettis Jr., probably boundaries, what we're looking at. Elijah Barres, probably field. I mean, they got a good mix here. I'd say once again, we're probably looking at a lot of slot guys. I mean, there's a lot of guys that's probably their best position would be slot. And you don't have what I'd consider, other than Cam Williams, somebody who has the ideal frame, I guess, for a field position. Elijah Barres, I think, has that same kind of body that you're looking for there. Does he have the speed to kind of get downfield, become that home run hitter that you're hoping for from that position? And then you only have a couple slot or only a couple of boundary guys here. And so I don't know your thoughts going into this. Notre Dame had to come up with some bodies. With Will Pauling, they got a guy, speed, and then of course Malachi Fields, but not going to be here. So a guy like Michael Gilbert is a golden opportunity. He's going to get a ton of reps, and I'll be surprised if we don't hear a whole lot about Michael Gilbert in this spring practices. Your thoughts here on this position?
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity for Gilbert. And he's going to be going up probably against Leonard Moore quite a bit, who's obviously the boundary corner, starting boundary corner for Notre Dame. And that's a matchup like you've seen how well Leonard Moore pretty much locked up just about everybody he faced, in the back half of the season. Who, if you can go out and you're making plays against Leonard Moore, that is going to speak awfully highly of where what you can expect from Micah Gilbert, and he's going to get those chances going against. I imagine he'll be working with the ones there most of the time, right? So until Fields gets there in the summer, that's what it's going to be. And I would say too, because of you kind of ran down everybody right behind them, really at in the spring. It's probably Bettis Jr. who's there too. So, but I don't think anyone expects Bettis Jr. to play at all as a freshman. So I wonder if someone like Cam Williams, that might be an opportunity, because size wise, I mean, he's over 200 pounds. He's 6'2". He's over 200 pounds. He could easily play the boundary. Like he's someone that I think, obviously speed to play the field, but has a size that you could say like this guy could play matchup on the boundary too. So I wonder if he'll get some looks there too as well, because they could kind of move him around. I think it's a great opportunity for so many of these guys. And you mentioned Pauling, who obviously you want him to be healthy, but that's not something if he's not and he's got to sit out. Like you have Greathouse. I think Greathouse in the slot is kind of established now that he is going to be like the dude there, right? And a guy that you could obviously move around as well, but he was just so fantastic in the final two games, and really kind of just showed really kind of throughout the season. Whenever the ball was thrown his way, he was just productive. He was 11 of 13 on contested catches, like just incredible, like contested catch rate. He's a guy who just, his compete level is off the charts. And for a guy that people don't think of as a guy who tests through the roof, I mean, he runs away from people after the catch, and he'll go up and get it. So I think he's a far better athlete than people give it credit for. I think last year in the spring, he kind of established himself as like, oh, he was one of like the top receivers on the team. I think it's just right now, there's just kind of no doubt that he should be the guy that you build the part of the offense around him. Like whoever wins the quarterback job, it's like, get familiar with throwing the ball to Jaden Greathouse, because that's a guy that you want to get touches to. And I think the same thing for Faison too, because Faison, obviously, if you look at target wise in the playoff, Greathouse and Faison far above everybody else in the team other than Mitchell Evans at tight end, right? Like those were the top two receivers. They had way more. They basically like, kind of pushed out Bo Collins from, what he was doing. And obviously there was parts of that with Bo Collins where he wasn't the most reliable there, but and Faison, I think one of the things for him is you just want to see him consistency catching the ball. Then again, we don't know how much he's going to practice in the spring because he's playing lacrosse as well. So that's another thing too. If he's not there, that's just another opportunity for guys like Saldate and Williams, because I think Saldate could possibly play the field as well too. I think this is one of these things, Mike, where Faison can play and be a contributor. He can be a playmaker. That where Greathouse is going to be. Malachi Fields, like pencil him in as like the starter at boundary when he gets in, but it's a chance for Gilbert, Saldate, Williams. I would throw Elijah Burress in there as another guy that out of the
Yeah.
freshmen probably has the best shot at like
He's going to make
kind of
noise.
playing
Yeah,
early. I think so too. And
I do too.
ideally too, he is a slot. I just think because he is someone who his short area quickness, but he's also somebody who can play the field. And I think if you look at where he is at in terms of he is more advanced as a route runner than a lot of freshmen coming in too. So I like all these young guys. It's going to be about like Mike Brown developing these guys and to see where they're at, because the talent there is probably as good as it has been, I would say, in quite a while for Notre Dame. But that needs to turn into like production where there have 4 guys. I think if you get 5, 6 guys, great. If you can get that many guys, but if you have 4 guys that you're like, man, anytime we throw the ball to these are the guys we want to get the ball to. And I think, you can say Fields is going to be one of those guys. You could say Greathouse is going to be one of the guys. Probably Faison as well. And it's going to be about Gilbert, Williams, Saldate, Pauling when he's there. Who's it going to be out of those group that really kind of step up?
It's interesting because I see your thoughts on the boundary and potentially Cam Williams, because physically, like you said, he could do it. But the thing with him has been just kind of learning what he needs to know. And does it make sense to kind of bounce him at other positions? You may have to, because you just don't have enough bodies, and you can't, especially if one of Gilbert or Jerome Bettis Jr. pull up lame, which we've seen how many times throughout spring and fall. That's certainly possible, and you need some bodies to run out there and do the thing. So, but ultimately, I hope that they put him at field and develop him, because I think that's where he can be a dangerous player. I agree with you. I think the talent level is really good. I'd say this is the fastest group of receivers Notre Dame's had in a very long time. When you look at the actual people, I mean, KK can fly, Logan Saldate can fly.
You didn't even mention KK Smith. That's another guy too.
And they like KK. They really like KK. So you also have as we talked about, Cam Williams. I mean, all these guys, these are dudes that can flat run. And so speed is going to be a good thing here. And if I'm Cam Williams, and especially if Jordan Faison is not practicing, I look at this as I have a chance to take his job. I really do. Yeah. If I show up and play, if Jordan Faison isn't going to be here, that's a lot of reps for me to show to the coaches, hey, I can be counted on. I've learned what I needed to learn. And, KK Smith, it's going to be interesting. Do you think you'll see him play some field, or do you think he'll play more slot? Because I think we realize, you and I, based off of things we've heard, Saldate is pushing, and if Greathouse was not there, he'd probably start, just based off a lot of the stuff that we hear. So he's a guy that's going to push a lot. So, where do you put KK in there? And I think that they don't have a lockdown field position right now. Nobody's really kind of stepped up and grabbed that. And so there's a lot of opportunities for these guys. And I can't wait to see what happens. The other thing too is I think we are in agreement. I don't want to speak for you, but I thought Jerome Bettis Jr. took a big step his senior year, where I thought,
definitely.
boy, it was going to take 2-3 years, before he became somebody who can compete. But he was competing against the very best players there in Georgia and excelling. So he's gone against some really good talent already and has shown that he can be an effective player. Yeah, he's going to have some things to learn, but I don't think that it's going to take him quite as long as I thought before. So I think it's going to be a highly competitive position. I like where they're at. I wish they had a few more guys like Cam Williams and his body type and his speed. Yeah. That would be ideal, what you'd love to have at field. It just is what it is. But we've seen Will Pauling, when given a chance, he can stretch the field. He can make plays. He can be that kind of guy. Is his best position slot? Maybe, but I think that they know, Mike Brown's worked with him. They know he could probably play field. He's a jacked up dude too. I mean, he's physically built pretty good. And so, obviously he'll be somebody put together pretty well when he finally gets out there and starts moving. But the one thing I think more than anything is Notre Dame's going to have some home run hitting ability that they haven't had for a while. And there's a lot of dudes that can do it. And we talk about Micah Gilbert as a boundary guy. Every time that guy's gotten in a game, he's stretching the field and making big plays down the field. And, he's, when you look at the spring game, the stuff he's done there, other times when he's been in the game, he's not a third down, 3rd and 8 running out type of player. He can do other things than become that just regular third down, get open type of guy. So I think the talent level is increased. They just got to get these guys developed, and we're going to find out how good of a coach Mike Brown is this year. We really are, because the talent is there, and there's opportunity there. And, if you can get, like you said, 4 or 5 guys ready to go, if they can maximize kind of what they're doing and their potential, this could be a very surprising group, I think. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think too, and Jacob Paulus mentioned that, about Pauling speed. Yeah, he's like he ran a 4.39. Like, yeah, he's fast, dude. He can really run. We know Cam Williams can really run. Gilbert, I think, shocked a lot of people because he wasn't a guy who had like blazing track times or had like a verified 40 that whatever, but he can separate. We've seen it. We've seen him do it against, Notre Dame's corners in practice. And that's just something that when you see someone do that kind of thing, it's kind of like how Josh Adams, people were like, oh, you didn't really see it. And then all of a sudden you're just like, wow, this guy really has that kind of different kind of speed. So I think they have guys like that. And then Fields obviously was a deep threat. He can really, really run too. I think one of the things this year that it kind of goes hand in hand with the receivers is whoever's at quarterback. I think all 3 of these guys, no matter who it is, has more just straight arm talent than Riley Leonard. So they can push the ball better down the field. I think that's fair to say that
they're more accurate, and yes, I agree.
Like, and whether they the managing the pocket and all these other little things, obviously the running ability, that's a different question. But I'm just talking about in terms of just stretching the field.
Arm talent. Yeah,
these guys have a chance. These guys can throw it over the top better. And the other thing is that Notre Dame, Angeli for sure. Angeli, every single time the guy throws the ball deep, it looks beautiful.
It really does.
And they're also going to have a line where last year, for much of the year, they did not have the trust that those guys would hold up in protection. So that also played a big part in what they could do in terms of being able to stretch the field and what they wanted to do in terms of how they attack things. Like, even if teams were running a 4-man rush, the idea was, hey, we got to get the ball out quickly, and I just think that's going to change this year because I think they're going to be able to protect better. So I think the combination of that and kind of what you said too about Mike Brown, and it's like, obviously this is an important year for Mike Brown and developing these guys. But I look at like guys that, Tyler Scott at Cincinnati, Alec Pierce at Cincinnati. These guys were just like freak athlete, super fast guys. And the one thing they did, and that was obviously under Mike Denbrock, is they were able to like stretch the field with those guys. Obviously, we've seen Mike Denbrock, what they did with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. and those guys at LSU too. He wants to throw the ball down the field. Will Fuller was his guy, right? Like, he wants to throw the ball down the field. So I think like that is something I expect to be a different element in the offense this year. And ultimately, who is better at like tracking the deep ball, getting separation, winning at the catch point, all that could determine which of these guys are the guys this year.
Yeah. So you guys that are going to come down with a football, right? And have the ability to separate. And mind you, they're going against some good corners. This is going to be a battle. It's going to be a real battle out there. So if these guys are making plays against Notre Dame's corners, you've got some players. So that's what we're looking for. All right. When I look at the tight end situation, Jamie, boy, if you're Jack Larson, this is a big opportunity. Eli Raridan's going to be, the guy. I don't think there's any question about that. He's going to be the guy. The guy from Arkansas, I forgot his name, will be coming in, but it sounds like
Tyus Washington.
but it doesn't look like he'll be there this spring or anything. But
no, summer.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're Jack Larson, I mean, this is a golden opportunity. And if you're Eli Raridan, I think you want to get him involved. We already know he's a good blocker. We already know that, right? And I think he's one of the better blocking tight ends Notre Dame's had in a while. He really does a good job, and especially towards the end of the year was very, very
awesome.
good. He really was. And we probably didn't mention it enough. There was just so much to talk about that was good. I really think he's going to be really good. We'll see when Flanagan gets back. I mean, obviously he's going to have some opportunities there too. But if I'm Jack Larson, man, this is a great opportunity to really show. But if I'm not Mike Denbrock, obviously you want to work on you want to work on inline blocking and the run game, that type of thing as well. But I'd almost be a little careful with Eli Raridan. I really would, because Cooper, we don't know what's going to happen with him. You don't know what you have with the Arkansas tight end, and you certainly don't know yet with Jack Larson. I think Jack Larson's going to be a very good player. He's not going to be somebody who's just going to wow you. But every time we've watched Jack Larson, he's open. You know what I mean? He's always open, and he always catches a ball. Great hands on that kid. Really good hands. Great route runner. He's just one of those guys that just is never going to wow you in anything. He's not the tallest. He's not the biggest. He's not the fastest. He's nothing. But as a route runner and his hands, that's where his elite is. And so, I mean, if I'm Denbrock, I almost kind of get him more involved and try and take some of the load off Eli Raridan in this spring. I'd also maybe look at trying to get some two-back look, because you also know you can't put too much on Eli. You can't put too much on Jack Larson. There's just only so many reps they can have. I almost think that this kind of gives you the opportunity to see what your running backs can do in the pass game, what it looks like with two-back look as well, and play with that a little bit. So we know Jeremiah Love can catch the ball. We've seen J.D. Price catch the ball well. Aeneas Williams, ace receiver, tremendous receiver. So I hope that's what we probably won't see it because we won't be invited into practice, but I hope that's what we see or hear a lot about, is that they start doing those types of things. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think this is a perfect opportunity because of, where they're at with tight end to run. I mean, they do run a lot of 11 personnel anyways, but it should be like 75, 80%, like the spring, and even mess around with some 10 personnel, because just giving some of these other young guys, like, hey, let's give some of these other guys reps. Let's see what they can do with just adding more there. Because like you said, Raridan, because of Flanagan's injury, and we have no idea if he's even be back at all next year. You get an Achilles, you get it late in the year.
Yeah.
I mean, there are guys who come back.
Yeah, maybe
there are guys who come back.
Yeah.
But obviously Jadarian Price, you look at, he had a Achilles. That happened in the summer. He was back for the next year, but that was like over a year of that thing when he was back. And he wasn't like,
they didn't put a lot of load on him either.
No, they didn't. Yeah. They didn't. So I think it was something that, and I think too, I think with a lot of people, would agree that with an Achilles injury, a lot of the times when you first come back, you're not the same guy right away. It takes time. And it was certainly, I think that was the case with Price, where he was a much different player this year than he was the previous year. So I think that's something to think about with Flanagan, which is just a shame, because I think he would have been so key for them.
Yeah.
it's a perfect thing for Kevin Bauman, who he's back for a 6th year. He could really establish himself as like tight end 2 in terms of
line.
like in line. Also,
I forgot about that. I don't know why I didn't
he
mention him.
no, it's just
missed.
so it's because he's one of these guys that like you just kind of like forget about because his career has just been stunted so badly by and I remember there was a practice in Notre Dame Stadium when Michael Mayer was just obviously one of the best tight ends of college football, and Kevin Bauman was at practice, and just it was one of the rare instances where we get a full practice in. Kevin Bauman was so dominant. People thought we're like, was that Mayer again in one-on-ones? No, it was Bauman. He was like mossing people left and right. He was so like he is a better receiver than people realize, and maybe he will never be the same guy that he was because of the injuries or whatever. But he can play, like he can play. So that's someone that obviously you just hope that he stays healthy. You hope that he's able to get a chance there and deliver there. I am 100% with you in Jack Larson's. This is a perfect opportunity for him. There is a savviness to him that is beyond his years. I really like that he's like, listed at 250. He's obviously put on weight since he's been at Notre Dame. I'm excited to see him. And I know you do want to protect Raritan from a certain standpoint, but I really think, and this isn't something that should be a surprise to anyone who's listened to Power Hour for the last few years. We are super high on Eli Raritan, just at everything that just his total game. And obviously the first part of his career was stunted because of, recovering from the ACL injury coming out of high school. Then he suffers it again. And then it was a slow comeback from it. And they didn't want to re-injure it. So it was a slow process. And then this past season, it was kind of baby steps to getting. And then all of a sudden he became like a bigger part of the offense. And they started throwing to him on those slot fades. I think he could be one of the most talented tight ends that Notre Dame has had. Like, to me, he is like a faster Cole Kmet in terms of just straight athletic ability. No just doubt. Athletic ability, right? Like,
bigger too.
And right. So he really, if you're looking for a guy that could go from, he's going to be the starter to being like, he might be like one of the best tight ends in college football.
Yeah.
That is on the table for me. I truly believe that. So I'm really kind of excited. I want to see him, or at least hear just all this kind of stuff that he's having a dominant spring, that you're like, he is a problem. Cause I think based on how he finished the year and, we talked about the blocking and obviously the catching stuff too, but his confidence should be super high. And, I really, really am excited to kind of see him take off. Obviously, Mitchell Evans was a very good player, and he was a very key player for Notre Dame, obviously in the college football playoff too, as he kind of went along. But I think Raritan is a different type of player and potentially a more dangerous player just in terms of just speed. He is a faster, like he's the guy that if he's totally healthy, I know Evans did fine at the combine or whatever. He did fine. And obviously he did well in something, but it wasn't like the most athletic tight end group this year. Just in general, it wasn't. Like, to me, Eli Raritan could be one of these guys that, like, when it's his time at the NFL combine, people hear him like tearing it up because he's got that kind of ability.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's going to be interesting too, because I think, first of all, if I'm Mike Denbrock, I'm talking to Chris Ash, and we're going to talk a little O-line here, and I say, what I want you to do in this spring is, I want you to bring a lot of pressure, right? I want to see how my guys up front handle pressure, because if I'm Denbrock, the problem we looked at so much last year was on third down, and Aeneas Williams had to be in the backfield. I mean, there's just he had to be there, you couldn't even think about an easy release for him to, run angle routes like we've talked about many times. We'd like to see, stuff out in the flats. He had to be there. And I think if I'm Mike Denbrock, I want to know, especially if I have an idea who the 5 starters are going to be, if I have an idea of that, I want to throw as much as I can at that group, just so I can get an idea of how they handle it and what they need to teach. Because I think, Yama, for the next step for this offense is you're going to have to figure out a way how your 5 can block their 4 on their own, right? If you're going to be an explosive offense, you got to figure out how your 5 can block their 4 on their own, and maybe even the 5th, on a blitzing situation. Your 5 have got to figure that out. If you're going to be a dominant, explosive offense, that needs to happen. And so, spring's a great time to try it, just to see where you're at. Obviously, early fall, you want to see it as well. But that formulates as, at least I've never been an offensive coordinator, but I would like to. I would think that those are things that I would want to know before I went in to try and figure out what I can do offensively when it comes to the fall. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things too that was such a benefit to everything that the offense did in the lead up to the season and everything throughout the year was that going against Al Golden in practice and all of the different things that they presented in terms of like, I feel like day one, I mean, the day one of when they're in pads, like, not when they're not without pads, but like the day one with their pads, it's like they have like blitz packages upon blitz packages ready to send at you to attack you. And that just, you have to, because that helps everything, how you evaluate your quarterback, how you evaluate your line, how you evaluate your backs, every single piece of it. It's so critical. So I just think that is a really, really important part of that, is like stepping into spring and being like, and right away, the defense being at a certain level right away. And we know that defense tends to be ahead. This is a little bit of a transition, with a new coordinator. But I know we talked about it with Greg last week on Hidden Hustle after they spoke last week, but I loved everything Chris Ash said about like, this is Notre Dame's defense. And like, if it ain't broke, I'm not trying to fix it, because there would be nothing stupider than coming in and just being like, well, we're running everything my way. Cause you adapt it. And he talked about it, right? It's, players over plays. It's adapting to the guys. And it's just like, at some point too, like, if you look at it, there's just a lot of times too, where defenses will, not to kind of flip this into defense, but like, you wouldn't use certain players in a certain way. You wouldn't even think of using like linebackers and be like, well, this guy's going to be an edge rusher here, and this guy's going to do this and that. And we're going to have more guys who are going to be like Swiss Army knives. But when you know that that's what they've done here before, and obviously they're recruiting guys specifically to do that kind of thing, that allows you, gives you the more freedom to be able to do that kind of stuff. And you want that same kind of versatility on offense, where you can like move people around, do things, say like, hey, this is how we want to protect this. We want to do these different things. And you just want to be challenged right away. And that makes everybody better. So I think it's actually like a super, super important part of spring.
3 of my best friends are pilots. There 2 fly for the major airlines and 1 flies corporate. And the reason I bring this up is every year they have to go down for simulator training. And it's like 2 weeks of living hell. And basically what they do is you fly in a simulator cockpit of the type of plane that you're going to be flying. And basically for 8 hours, they just throw everything that could possibly go wrong at you. And you just got to solve that problem in the moment. And you don't pass unless you can figure out how to do this. That's what spring football is. That's what fall football is. You're trying to give each player all these different looks so you can see how they react, and can they hold up in this, can they hold up in that, and do they do the right things when this happens. And so that's really what a lot of this learning is about. And yeah, it's we got to install our offense, and we got to know the plays, and we got to, this is what we're going to do on third down here, and blah blah blah. But when it comes to who starts, right, and who gets to play, this is where you really kind of find out who's going to play. Is spring football, early fall, is what when we stress you and we put you in these situations where you are stressed, it's how do you handle it, and can you do your job? And that's both offense and defense. That's both sides of it. So I think it's very, very important. It's not just a teaching thing, although I do think fundamentals very, very important in spring, extremely, extremely important. And so excited to see what changes there. Chris Ash talked a little bit about we may tackle things a little bit different, or we may approach some things a little bit differently. I wanted to get your thoughts on that real quick, but just I just think that this is going to be a really good opportunity for them to find out how advanced somebody is, and also what they need to do to make them improve. And so it's going to be fun to see. Thoughts here. And then I also wanted to get your thoughts on Chris Ash talking about how they may approach some things a little bit differently, tackling or whatever the case may be. Thoughts there too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely, because you don't want to. I mean, you don't want to overload people, especially when it's young guys, because you don't want to. You don't want to just like write somebody off right away because they don't have everything in their toolkit right away to be something. Because if you do that, that's how you can end up losing someone who's really talented. They're just maybe not learning at that pace yet, or they came from a high school program where it didn't there, or they're adjusting to something that they haven't seen. And it's different. Like we talked about with Cam Williams, right? Like the whole time, everyone's like, Cam Williams, like, what's going on with Cam Williams? Is he going to be this guy? Is he going to do this or whatever? And it's like, well, he needs to take time to do this. It's like, if you give up on a guy like that, then what's the point of even recruiting a guy like that? You know what I mean? You can't just recruit guys that have, right away that they came from a certain offense or whatever. Sorry.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're seeing that right now, where some people on the board are saying, well, Gerby Lambert hasn't stood out. The guy's a freshman. You know what I mean? It's like they expect a Joe Alt to come in every year and just start, and it's like, because Knapp did it and Alt did it. The only reason that happened was because they had to. They had to. They didn't have any other choice. That's the way it had to be. So, like, you can't just throw somebody under the bus. Like, they say, well, Gerby Lambert might not be as good as we thought. It's like, no, there's some good players there. There's some good players playing. It's hard to, it's Anthony Knapp's one of the best players on the offensive line. And before he got injured, probably playing the best. He really was. So, anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but just to
no, but it's true.
Point.
It is true though, right? Because that is the same thing with offensive line and all these positions, is that different guys are going to learn at different paces. And obviously, when you're recruiting like Notre Dame is, when you're bringing in guys, especially like on the offensive line, that there's talent. You're going against other guys that are talented. Maybe Gerby Lambert was the highest rated. Maybe he's like the biggest physical freak of them all. But if you don't have all the other pieces of it, it doesn't matter. You're not going to play. Like it doesn't matter how big, like how much you can move a guy. But if you can, your one great rep isn't going to, if somebody has 4 good ones and that's their thing, like you can't beat that. So that's what I think people always they look at, like it's just the raw talent and you just got to let those guys go in. And it's like, there's so much more that goes into it. There's so much development that goes into it. And really, if you look at all the success of so many guys at Notre Dame, specifically on this last year's team, all these young guys, football junkies, like guys who were just like obsessed with, like, this guy was in the weight room, the film room all the time. He was just all the time. Like, people know that, like, Kingston Viliamuasa, like KVA is an absolute like came in 230 pounds, built like a rock, just like a good athlete, all these kind of things. The reason that he played and was there right away was like he was advanced with his mind and he came from a defense that he learned stuff, but then also was like, hey, he was like a sponge, like trying to learn things as he's going along. And obviously it's different. Not all freshmen. It wasn't like he was like a genius level guy right away, but he was getting there. You could just see, you're like, he's already at this level. We'll just wait till he's there. So it's just, it is going to, you have to be at that level in order to play. And I think that's what should be an example for so many guys, like the Drake Bowens, the Adon Schulers, the KVAs, these guys that played, like, you know how many guys I was going through, because I was thinking about writing something on it, but I don't know if I'm going to, I don't know if it's going to lead anywhere, but I was thinking about Drake Bowen, played, basically was the starter next to Kaiser inside, played over 600 snaps, second to Kaiser in terms of snaps there at linebacker last year. You know how many guys as sophomores played that much? The list is short. It is very short. Like, it is like Manti Te'o and Jalen Smith. Out of recent years, that's it. Like, even guys like, you look at some guys, great players, like Tranquil, Coney, JD Bertrand, Marist, like, they were not at the level there. So that's why when you look at guys who are doing those kind of things, that's like, it's a special level. Jeremiah Wosu-Kormoa, I mean, he had the foot injury, but he wasn't ready. Like, mentally, that was one of the things that almost kept him from being on the field there. But that's also a perfect example of a guy that, hey, he's got this ability. We got to adjust to him. And then all of a sudden, by the time he left, he was like a master's level, but it took a while. Yeah. And you don't want to lose a guy who's that freakish. So, everybody's path is different, but do everything you can. The one thing that I think people should be so confident in, based on what we've seen from this staff in the 3 years, is development. These guys know how to develop these football players. So that's why, like, when they do land these certain guys that you and I really like as recruits, and we're like excited about their talent, I'm like, I think there's a pretty good chance these guys are going to hit, because if they put in the work, because the coaches know how to get these guys to play at a certain level.
Excited to see what happens. It's going to be a fun spring. Looking forward to it. We got a lot of questions here we wanted to get to, and we'll get to them now. Try and get to as many as we can. Any more insights to new hires that Marcus is presumably interviewing for? It seems like they want at least 3 more. Assistant GM reporting to Martin, a Bowden replacement reporting to Martin, and another recruiting office person. I don't have anything more to add to that. I mean, I've heard a name who's a former player, and I don't know where that's at. We'll see whether that happens, but he's currently at another school, and so we'll see what happens with that. But other than that, I have not heard anything at this point. I think that Marcus Freeman is trying to make sure he gets the right people, and that's the most important thing. And I think he has a very kind of specific type of person he's looking for each one of these roles, and so you'll probably see a number of guys interviewed for these roles. But I wouldn't be surprised if we heard something here later this week, maybe next week. I'm sure they're going to want to get these guys in before spring football starts, just to get them somewhat acclimated with what's going on. So I would guess that you'll probably hear some names very, very soon on this. All right. You've been vocal recently about being in favor of ND outbidding other schools for top-rated high schoolers. How do you see this balancing with the chemistry problems for paying top dollars for players that haven't produced yet in college? Well, I mean, seems to work everywhere else. Oregon still got to the playoff. They've been doing this for a while. Georgia, same thing. I mean, kids understand. They understand that, hey, Some guys are just going to get paid. That's just the way it is, and they're based off of whatever. Do I think at some point? I'm not sure it's the money that's going to really bother people, Jamie. I think it's more the playing time, right? So, all these guys are going to get paid something, and maybe at some point you're like, I don't know why they paid that guy that much. And each school is going to have that guy. Each school is going to have a guy that they paid way too much for, and he never produces. That's going to happen not just at Notre Dame, but at everywhere. But the way you fix that is the guy who should be playing, and as long as that guy is playing, it won't be a problem. And I don't think it's ever going to really be a problem with at Notre Dame, because I think the kids that are coming to Notre Dame are coming for the right reasons, and that's why some kids you just can't take. So, thoughts? Anything you want to add?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is what you do is you reward your best players that are on your team currently, and everything we've heard, that's what Notre Dame does. So, yeah. I don't think, like, when you're doing that, and when those guys, it's like, it's hard to argue when, if say Ben Morrison wasn't getting what, he thought he deserved or whatever. Well, Ben Morrison would leave if that was whatever. But notice that none of these guys have left for Notre Dame. I mean, part of it is because obviously, like, the culture and whatever, they're not trying to mess with it. But a lot of it is because it's like, hey, they go and they say, hey, you want this? We're going to get you this. And that's important. And if you're taking care of your guys, that's what Ohio State did that, right? They did that. I know they obviously spent to bring Caleb Downs and Quinshon Judkins in, but it's like, you didn't see Travion Henderson didn't seem to have a problem with it because he was getting a bag too,
yeah.
So it's just, as long as guys are getting paid fairly within the roster, I think it becomes not a big issue.
Well, and I mean, you don't think Jeremiah Smith got a big bag? Of course he did. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like,
I think he got multiple bags, Mike. Yeah.
And I guarantee you, Jeremiah Smith got more than Carnell Tate, and everybody else. And that's just, now he produced. He produced.
And when you do that, it's just what are you going to do? Like,
but I think that the issue they're asking is because I've said,
I totally get where he's asking. Yeah.
That hey, look, when you need a wide receiver, you just got to pay for one. You just got to now and again. I'm not saying that you go out and you buy 3 5-star wide receivers, because you can't afford to do that. But when you're trying to fix a problem, sometimes you have to overpay on that situation to fix the problem. And I've we talked about this on the board. It's like, look, if you struggle to get a quarterback, it's going to be a lot easier to get quarterbacks if you have one who has a lot of success. Well, you can take your chance and hope that you take a 3-star and you develop him, some guy who's not physically developed and blah blah blah, and mentally developed, and you develop him, and then he becomes a first-round pick. It happens. There's guys like Ben Roethlisberger who was completely overlooked and ended up in the MAC. There's tons of guys like that. And you can find that now and again, but that doesn't happen very often. So the reason that, Texas is getting all these 5-star quarterbacks is because those guys are now developing and they're going to be drafted high, and that's just the way it is. And it's been that way for a lot of these big time schools that get them. So, if you struggle at wide receiver and you struggle at defensive line, sometimes it makes sense to just pay up for a guy, because as soon as you develop a defensive lineman, guys are going to come in. There is a reason that Notre Dame does not struggle anymore landing corners that they want. There is a reason.
Yeah.
And it's because this guy has done a tremendous job of finding guys, developing them, and immediately they can play. And 1, it's great evaluation. 2, it's outstanding coaching. To take a guy like Leonard Moore, who played in it's not like he was a stiff that, played in terrible league in Texas. He was a guy that played some talent and was probably overlooked, but obviously this guy did a great job of evaluation and an even better job of coaching. And you also have to give a whole lot of credit to Leonard Moore. You got to give a lot of credit to Leonard Moore because he's the guy who did the work and he's the guy who ended up becoming the player, but that he is. So my thoughts are, I don't think you want to pay. You don't want to be the highest bidder for, your top running back, or you're the highest bidder for your top quarterback, or because then you're not going to have enough money to pay everybody else. And if you pay way too much for your recruits, you're not going to have enough to keep your current roster of guys that are really, really good. But it's like anything else. Sometimes in free agency, you see in the NFL, you're like, oh wow, they overpaid for that guy. Well, they had to. They didn't have any other choice.
Yeah.
It's just, this is just what it is. If you want to fix problems, that's what you got to do. All right. And another question about, they want to know why Notre Dame isn't willing to do it. And again, we've kind of broken that down. I put a big thread up the other day and just kind of said, okay, well, here's the numbers. How would you pay these guys? And I don't think people have sat down and put pen to paper and they look at it and they're like, okay, well, you get 22 million. Well, we know Notre Dame's not going to spend 22 million on football, and Matt put something up which was surprising to me, where he was saying he thought Georgia was only going to use 13.5 of that for football. And I thought, boy, it would be higher than that. They would be somebody who would push. But when you talk about 13.5 at 22 starters, right? 22 starters at $500,000, you're already at $11 million. You know what I mean? So if you pay your starters, let's say $500,000, just one round number, you're already at $11 million. Where are you getting the rest of the money? So that's the thing that people need to understand. You can't, you have to put pen to paper. That's why Mike Martin is here. He has done this at a very high level and has done it for a long time. So I think a lot of these teams are going to get into a position where they overspent for this guy and overspent for that guy. And then they're going to have a problem. And the thing that stood out to me, and the thing that I guess I've looked at, is Notre Dame's going to have a harder time cutting some of these guys. Like if you're at Texas A&M and you don't produce and you've got a high number, you're gone the next year. That's it. You're gone. And the reason why is because the fans are like, well, you can't do that. You promised this guy an education. No, it's over. That's over. This is a business. It's over. So, but of course, Notre Dame doesn't want to be looked at as a football factory. So they'll be a little bit less reluctant to push these guys out of the door. That's not going to help them, but that's what they're going to do. But it's not going to help them. If a guy doesn't produce, you got to push him out the door. Now, that's only, I think, if you pay a guy a high number, right? If you pay a guy a low number, and he's still working and doing the types of things, I'll give you an example, not to single out somebody, but a guy like, say, Bodie Cahoon, right? A guy that probably didn't get a huge number coming in, working hard, you hear good things about whatever. And then all of a sudden, he'll get his money, and he'll get his money if he continues to develop. You probably had to pay KVA a little bit more than you did Bodie Cahoon, but if you paid KVA a big time number and he didn't produce, well, you're going to have to push KVA out the door.
And yes, and Cahoon was better. And
that's what you're going to have to do. And that's going to be the reality of this. And so it's not going to be pretty, and people are going to be upset because the way things were done were not the same as what's going to happen in the future. All right.
Yeah. Well, just one thing to add to it too, Mike, is I think it's going to be so important for teams to, I think when you look at it, say like Georgia, there's so many guys that they just like, they could sign this 5-star and they're like, well, this guy, I mean, he does got some problems, but you know what, if we can get him figured out, we can get. Now I think there's going to be less of that for a lot of these schools, because you're going to have to vet guys more. Like that is that's another reason
why that guy. And exactly. Exactly. And good point. Very good point.
Right. So that's the thing too. So, and I look at it, and I'm going to tell you right now, Texas A&M, they brought in some guys. They have talent, obviously, right? They brought in some guys in the portal that I have heard some bad stuff about. Like, these are good guys, not good teammates, talented, super talented. I'm not going to name names, whatever. I'll get into it later. But like, super talented, but not exactly the guys that you're like when you're talking about building a culture. Like, that's not whatever. And to me, that is going to be something to watch with them, because Mike Elko, I think one of the things he did, he was building a great culture at Duke and all this kind of stuff, right? But when you get into a place like Texas A&M and you want to win right away, and we got to get this talent, and in order to compete with the rest of the SEC and whatever, and then you don't vet as much because you're just saying like, well, this guy's talent's better, so we got to go with talent. That could come back to bite you. And so I think that is something to watch with some of these schools that are just whatever. And I would say like, Miami is a little bit, because they're a bit loose with that too. So that is something that I think if you look at it, and I look at like Oregon bringing in Bear Alexander.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe it's just nothing for them to just get rid of him, whatever. But you bring in too many of those guys, and
bad for culture.
It's bad.
And I think I do think Notre Dame's doing it the right way. I really do. But for me, I just think that at some point you're going to, if you got a problem that's a continual problem, you're just going to have to pay up for somebody at some point. And again, if it doesn't work out, you push them out the door and do what you got to do. But Notre Dame's at the point where they don't have a lot of problems. They don't have a lot of problems on their roster right now. The roster is in very good shape in most positions. But kind of like the portal, sometimes there's little holes here that you need to fix. And sometimes if you want to get to that next level, you're going to have to just pay up for a guy. And so, the guy wants to know, is that a Marcus decision? Is it a Bavakwa decision? Is it the school's decision? I'd say it's all of the above, but I think it's more Marcus trying to figure out what he wants, and then also how much money do you have? And I think that my issue that I've been kind of railing about, and I've talked about this countless times, is it's that window that they had. It's like everybody knew this window was coming between the end of last year and August, and you could play whatever you wanted, and it was not going to fall under the $22 million or whatever it is, those deals that you had. That was a golden opportunity. A lot of teams took advantage of that. I don't think Notre Dame did. That's where I had the biggest problem. I don't think it's going to matter moving forward. I really don't. And as I pointed out in many times on the boards, the thing that's going to matter the most is that extra NIL thing. This $22 million is going to get spent. How it's going to get spent. It's how you are going to separate you from everybody else. Is, do you have people in your network, meaning people in your administration, that can go out, solicit, speed stick, can solicit, brawn razors, can solicit, men type of products to then come and say, well, I want Jeremiah Love to be my spokesman, and, let's get him an NIL deal. That is going to be the biggest part of this that I don't think a lot of people understand. You need to have somebody who's very good at that. But also, as I pointed out on the board, Notre Dame's players don't have, a lot of those guys don't have the social media following some of these other guys have. Nobody has the Travis Hunter or even Shedeur Sanders type of numbers on some of these things. There's not a lot of those guys that have some of these, social media numbers that some of the others have. And that makes a big deal, because when you're trying to, it's not just that you can get Speed Stick to give you $4 million. You have to justify that now based off of this clearinghouse, that $4 million is valuable, and is a legit number that they should give you. And the only way to do that is to say, well, look at all these social media followers this guy has. Look at how many he has on Instagram. Look at how many he has on X. Look at how many he has on all the other social medias. Of course, that's a value, because he has that. And because Notre Dame's players are not real clout chasers, they're not guys that are out there. That's just not their DNA, where some other guys, it's all, things are really important, those types of things. You don't see a lot of the other stuff that you see some of the other guys. So I think it's really important for Notre Dame to have somebody in-house who can help these guys build their brand, build their social media, build their following. Because if you're going to try and pay them down the road through this extra NIL, you got to have the reach to do that. Now, because Notre Dame is exposed so much compared to other programs, I think that there is an opportunity there to say, well, look, we're on these networks, they're here, we're a national brand compared to some of these other schools that are more regional. You can have a bigger argument in that regard to say, yeah, that way that makes sense why Notre Dame would have, because say Speed Stick or whatever, and you're at Georgia, well, you can say, well, here's how many eyeballs we can look at in kind of in this area. Yeah, there's some people in Washington State may pay attention to Georgia, but it's not as much as Notre Dame, who's more of a national brand. So, so again, I think that those positions are going to be extremely important. And if I were Notre Dame, that's where I would be looking into it. All right, which of you guys thinks have the best traits to play nickels? Carson Hobbs, Tate Johnson, play nickel. Hobbs, Tate Johnson, Creed Thomas, someone else. I think we know Carson Hobbs is somebody that's probably going to get a strong look there this spring at the nickel position behind Devonta Smith. I'd say that that's probably the guy so far. When it comes to the next round of guys, whether it's Creed Thomas or Dallas Golden or Mark Zachary, I don't know. I think Mark Zachary could be a pretty good a guy in that role. Good tackler. What we don't know is how they blitz, how well they play, it kind of closer to the line of scrimmage, that type of thing. But I don't know your thoughts here, Jamie. Anything you want to add?
Well, you know what, I like that he asked about all these guys, but I think one of the things it's kind of hard to pinpoint and say like this guy has the best traits for that. I think the reason why he, or I'm going to guess this is why he said it, is because all those guys have traits that could translate to them playing there. Like, I think one of the things with like Creed Thomas is, he's a guy who's played safety. Obviously he's played outside corner. He's a guy who finds the football. He's a smart player. I watch him. I think he's a guy who understands leverage. That's a huge part of playing nickel. I think he's a solid tackler. So that's another part of it. Tate Johnson, I think because he's a guy that played quarterback on offense, right? He was a guy that carried the football, kind of understands a little bit about the running game, maybe the run fits. He's a guy who's obviously played outside corner a little bit for Notre Dame last year. Size wise, he's a guy, I think it's if you look at that, he can match up with different people there. He's an exceptional athlete. He can do these other kind of things there to kind of match up with different athletes there, like whether it's tiny slots, bigger receivers. Some guys, obviously, some programs like to use bigger things. So I think it's all like kind of like pick your poison of like what you specifically want there and what they're specifically looking for. But I think what's good is kind of like shows with like Notre Dame and like Mike Mickens specifically too, of what they've done is they find these guys with these different skill sets that can play different spots and project at different spots. They don't have to fit into a box, right? Yeah. So and that's why I think that if they don't, you can always go. I think it is a smart thing to go and look how it's worked out with getting Thomas Harper and Jordan Clark the last couple of years. You can go and get a good nickel in the portal, right? That is definitely a possibility. But they also have guys that if they want to train to do that, they have skill sets that all of these guys can really have a chance to succeed there.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. When will your staff get a chance to get your first looks at the new guys on the team, especially freshmen? I'd really like to know how Cam Heron stacks up to the other linemen. We'll get a visual look at him. I'm not sure we're going to be able to watch him slam into guys in the 11 situation. Traditionally, Marcus Freeman's kind of usually only had the first practice open, and they're in basically shorts and a shirt, and a helmet. We don't get to see a lot of them kind of banging into each other in the first practice. Now, sometimes he's had later in the practice, an opportunity like on Saturday. We got to hope that that's, again, something that happens, but sometimes it doesn't. And with a new coordinator, I'm going to guess we probably won't see much. So Again, I hope I'm wrong, but they probably don't want us talking a whole lot about stuff. So we'll see. Uh, Mullins is allegedly 6'5" or 6'4", 275. Is there a possibility he could move to strong side end? He played tight end and defensive end in high school, so he has agility. I think it's possible, but I'm not sure they're going to need him. I know a lot of people say, well, they only have Bryce Young and Burnham on the other side, and it's like, yeah, but Junior could pop over there. There's no doubt about that. He could,
they can move guys.
Yeah, Botello could move over there. And look, you're not going to want to play any more than you're going to want to play Bryce Young and Burnham a lot because they're just good football players. So you're probably not going to want to go three on your third option there a whole lot, especially if they're productive. Your thoughts here, Jamie?
Yeah, I think I saw this from a couple people. Like, I don't think people, it's not as cut and dry as like this guy can only play Viper and this guy can't play strong side. That it's not quite that, like that strong side doesn't have to be 280 pounds and he's got to be this or that or whatever. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case, right? And Boubacar last year, because that was one of the things that Botello was so good that it was like, I think probably even Notre Dame thought, hey, Boubacar is going to be a starter. Like, he's going to start at Viper. And then Botello, they were like, I mean, we got to keep Botello as a starter because he was phenomenal. And they were like, well, we got to get these guys on the field at the same time sometimes in just, standard downs. So like, well, Boubacar are going to play some, strong side end too. So they can flip guys. It's not as simple as, just them, this person only plays this and this person only plays that. It's just like the same thing with inside, right? They have a lot of the guys like, play nose, play three tech, do that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's going to be interesting to see how they all do that moving forward. Let's see. 4th and 1, game on the line. Which O-line are you calling a run play towards? I'd say Charles at this point. And what I'd love to see is Charles next to Knapp. I think that those two are really, really good run guys. And I don't think Anthony Knapp got the credit that he should have got, especially as a true freshman, to play as well as he did in the run game. If you go rewatch a lot of those plays, they ran behind him a lot, and he did a good job. He definitely did.
He definitely did a good job.
Now let's see. It's a different game when you're playing center. It's a different game. There are bigger dudes in there. There are bigger, stronger dudes in there, and it's harder to move them. But I'd certainly say Charles. I mean, I think Charles is just going to be a monster wrecking crew next year. I'll be very surprised if I wouldn't. Any thoughts from you, Jamie?
Well, I think as you were saying that, and I don't disagree with you at all, but I was thinking, I'm like, well, you could definitely run behind Billy Schrouth as well. Like, I think, and Wagner like moves people in the run game. Like, so
Especially
I think that's kind of,
he did, yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that really kind of stood out about the line really is, I think like across the board, there wasn't like as many like weak spots of like, you're like, man, they gotta like, obviously when you had Quentin Nelson and Mike McGlinchey there, and you're going to be like, well, we're going to run this side. But the difference between that and the right side, was quite significant.
Yeah.
And I think it's obviously they don't have a Quentin Nelson or even technically a McGlinchey yet, but like, I would say across the board, you feel pretty good. But I do think Charles Jagasaw is going to be like just mauling dudes this year. I think that's a safe prediction.
I cannot wait to watch it. I cannot wait. All right. If they win, they will come officially dead as a statement. It seems there's so many other factors now that it's used to be in recruiting. I think it's less, because again, there's so many other things that are out there with the NIL and opportunity. And I do think kids are taking a bigger look than in the past of opportunity. And the reason I do think so is because they know they can leave the next year. So, if they don't like something, they can be gone. And also, if they get there and they feel like they don't have a great opportunity, they can be gone. And so I think what you'll see is a lot of kids will probably be looking at the roster saying, I'm going to choose this school because I think I can play right away and they're going to give me a big bag versus, and I do think this hurts Notre Dame a little bit, versus a lot of kids who are like in the past, may not play right away for 2 years, but if I stick around, I have a great chance to play and I get a degree from Notre Dame. I don't think kids are thinking that as much as they were. And that hurts a little bit because, kids are, I'm gone to the next, grass is always greener type of situation. And I think that's going to be a situation. Your thoughts?
I mean, yes, that is true in terms of like if you win or whatever, it's not going to be as simple as that. But I think like I think so many people thought like, well, Notre Dame made a national championship game. All these recruits are coming now. It's like it's definitely not that simple when it comes to Notre Dame and all that too, because of who's on their board and who's not. But also too, like if you look at Alabama and Georgia, it kind of is as simple as like, hey, if you build it, they will come because they recruited at that high level, but it's like they jumped a level when they started to like win national championships year after year. And then they had to pay less because they could say, well, you can go to Oregon and you can get that. Yeah. We'll give you less here, but you'll win a national championship and you'll be in a first round pick.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing. So I think one of the things that I think I'm really looking forward to seeing over the next couple years at Notre Dame is because specifically there's so many guys who are young on this team that I think are going to be, if you look at where this year's draft is for Notre Dame, and like Watson and Morrison are probably the only two. Leonard, actually, I've heard is creeping up. Maybe he will be a third round pick or something, but probably Morrison and Watts are the only guys who are going to be, day one or
first
day two
rounds.
picks. Yeah. And ultimately you want to have like a ton of those guys, because those are the guys you point to and say, hey, this is whatever. Because I mean, no shots at anyone is a 6th round pick. You get drafted by the NFL. I mean, you're a heck of a player, but it's different than selling like, hey, this guy's a 1st or a 2nd round pick. So if Notre Dame gets to some of these guys where if we look at all these young players, on these defense, like if Boubacar and Bryce Young, like those guys, I look at those guys, Leonard Moore, right? Those guys have a chance to be 1st round picks, right?
Sure.
And when those guys start doing it, Charles Jaggers, all these guys, right? So it's like if these guys start doing it, if like KVA ends up being like a 1st or 2nd round pick, like Drake Bowman, whatever, all these guys, right? Raritan, all these guys, that's when you all of a sudden that changes recruiting, because that's
helped Michigan a tremendous amount. It has helped Michigan a lot.
Huge, right? So I think ultimately, like when we're talking about that, and if Notre Dame comes this year, they're going to be a very good team again. If they go and they get to a place where, hey, Notre Dame's in the Final Four again this year, like obviously people want them to win it, but it's like if you're in the CFP Final Four again this year, back-to-back years where it's like, hey, you're one of the best teams again, that's how when people are like, well, you beat a Georgia type team again. That's when people just like people take notice. It's not a one-off.
Go ahead, Greg.
Well, I think there's like factors, and you guys have talked about it. I do think it's like we should bring up Notre Dame has agency here, and I think between December and where we are today, like they didn't do a good enough job of capitalizing on their success. I like it is true that I think they didn't do well enough to put them in position for 2026. They just didn't. And I we don't need to get into the reasons right now because, we're about to end the show, but this is topic for another day maybe, but they should have done better and they didn't. And so they have agency in how it looks right now. They can still come, there's plenty of time for them to build a very good class in 2026. I'm just saying, like, there's not a ton of momentum, and I just think they fumbled the bag a little bit.
Well, I think it too is, I mean, I don't want to get into a whole lot of things here, but because we don't have the time. But I do think for the way they looked at it is, look, the best thing we can do, whether we go out and recruit or right now, is go out and show that we can win this thing. And look, if they would have won, it certainly would have helped even more. But I think that they wanted to prove that. So maybe there wasn't as much time spent on the other stuff that they needed to be spending time on because they were so focused on how do we get to this next thing. And, if we want to get there, we have to show that we can get there. And so it's kind of a catch-22. But Greg, I think it comes down to that's where your support staff's supposed to be there. Right. That's right. Yeah. And you don't have the same support staff that Georgia has. You don't have the same, as some of these others. And then half of them are out the door. I mean, we knew we'd heard that Chad, this was before, like in December, he was talking to USC based off of things we've heard. Well, how interested is he going to be if he's got all these other opportunities? He's thinking about leaving. I mean, everybody who's left a job or is thinking about leaving a job, they know as soon as that kind of gets into your head, you're just done. You're done there. You're just not doing what you normally were doing. And so, I think that there's part of it. And not to counter Jamie's thoughts. Jamie's absolutely right. But I would say Notre Dame does have one thing in their corner that they could say to these kids is say, look, we might not have a whole lot of first and second round draft picks, but we're such damn good coaches. We got these 6th round picks, and we could play with all these guys. We're still kicking their ass. So imagine if we had your talent, what we could do to these people. And that's the way I would sell it. And say those guys may have better players, but we're trying to get better players. But they're not better coaches than us, and I can tell you why. Because they have better players, and we're still kicking their ass. And, and I think that says a lot, and you can do that. But, we do have one more question here, and I think this was a good one. Why will ND win a national championship and why will they not win a championship this year? And I think it comes down to one thing. I really do. And it's, I should say 2 things. Can you protect your quarterback? And how well does your quarterback play? And I think that those are going to be the two biggest things that are going to play, because I think Notre Dame has pretty much everything else they need to make a big run in this. And I think that I feel pretty good that Notre Dame's going to be able to protect their quarterback. I really feel good about that. I just don't know how well the quarterback's going to play. Your thoughts? Let's start with you, Greg.
Why they will is kind of what you guys talked about earlier with the offense. Like this could be one of the more explosive offenses they've had in a very long time. And I think explosiveness and the ability to score at any time and score points in bunches it portends very well to you being a national team, right? Yeah. The reason why they won't is, like you said, the quarterback can't do it in must-have-it moments. The way Riley Leonard kind of did. Obviously he didn't against Northern Illinois, but in every other game, like he came through when they needed him, and you need that from your quarterback. So if they can't get that sorted, and the other part is like they haven't done it since 1993. Yeah, I'm going to count 93 as a national title, but you know what I'm saying?
I'm with it. It's been
30. It is for sure.
It's been 30 years. Yeah, and that's why they won't, just because it's been that long. They usually don't. That's why.
Jamie.
I mean, obviously the quarterback is the main thing, because I think if you look at, like, if Penn State, if Drew Aller was that dude, they beat Notre Dame.
They would have won. Yeah. They do. Yeah.
But he's not that dude.
No,
he's not that dude. He's not. So
he wasn't even good in that game. If he would have even been good, he was bad. Yeah.
If he was decent, they probably would have won that game because of how it started, right? He just had to be decent the rest of the way, and he was bad. And they even gave him breaks, like taking picks off the board and stuff, so that's the thing, is that what you never know with the quarterbacks is you can even have a guy like Aller's gotten better, and he might end up being like good enough that he's a high pick. He'll be better next year too. But can you be the guy in that moment when you need it? That is a question until you get there, right?
Yeah.
And that was the thing we found out about Riley Leonard, is he was that guy in that moment, right? So yeah, So that's the big thing. And I'll say this too. And I agree with everything with the offense. It's like they have this potential, so they have to realize, and so that's part of with the quarterback too. But I think really, and at defensive tackle, I think because every other piece on the defense, I think, man, they really got it all there. And I think they can be fine at defensive tackle. But if you want to win a national championship, you got to be better than fine. You have to be like, that means that it can't be like Anye is back and he is that guy that he was showing there, and he's creating that. Elijah Hughes all of a sudden is just like,
yeah,
man, this was a big time pickup here, right?
Those two do
Armel,
yes.
Yeah, Armel Mukum, all of a sudden you're like, oh man, he is a dude, and like that kind of thing, right? Like, because I think Dawson is going to be a good player. Like I think Rubio, he's going to be like a very good player against the run. Heinisch, what he's going to get versus, as a pass rusher. But I think there are limits to all of those guys, and it's those kind of next three guys. Maybe Seviani, you want to throw him in there, whatever, right? Like even a Mullins or whatever. If just say he could be a disruptive guy and whatever. Let's see. It's going to be those guys, because when it comes down to it, and it's something, whatever, I'm saving that I'm writing about 6 thoughts this week. Like, look at every national championship in the last 10 years. They had dudes at defensive tackle, and not just good guys, dudes. So that is, I think is ultimately going to be super important, because the other thing is too, is that when you do that, you don't have to dedicate as many people to the run, and you can do, and once that happens, I mean, you're cooking with gas. You're Georgia, you're Alabama, you're wherever. Yeah.
All right, guys, that's going to be it for the show. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We will talk to you next week. We'll get into O-line, D-line next week, breaking down the positions. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week on Power Hour.